Hey there, welcome to That Dang Dad. My name is Phil, and tonight I want to return to a discussion about my time in law enforcement. But this one's going to be a little different. Instead of talking about some horrible thing I did or some explanation for why I believe in abolishing the police, I want to explore an ethical dilemma that arose during my tenure as a cop that has to do with technology. Partly because I think it's interesting, and partly because I think the contours of this dilemma have a lot of relevance outside of law enforcement, and it might be a useful touch point when we think about our relationship to technology, both the stuff that exists today and the stuff that might be invented tomorrow. Tonight, I want to talk about the debate that I lived through about automated license plate scanners in the 2010s. To set the stage, I want to first give you some insight into one of the things cops are doing when they drive around all day, in between harassing unhoused people and murdering unarmed civilians. It's very common as a cop to see a vehicle that stands out in some way and run the license plates through dispatch or on your in-car laptop. This will query one or more databases and show you who the car is registered to, the address the vehicle is registered to, whether the vehicle is stolen, and any restrictions or warrants associated with the vehicle. 95% of the time it's nothing, but every once in a while you get lucky and find a stolen vehicle or something interesting. A police officer can run your plate at any time for any professional reason or even just on-the-job curiosity. Technically, it's a crime to run plates for personal reasons, but as you might imagine, that doesn't always stop the police. But essentially, this is because you do not have what's called an expectation of privacy for your license plates out in public. When you move upon a public street, you do so understanding the police can see what you're doing and check your plates. Well, one day someone thought to themselves, man, requiring the police to physically see a plate and put it in the computer is wasting endless minutes. What if we put a camera on the roof of the cop car that just automatically scanned license plates constantly while the cop drives around and alerts him if there's an issue? And so the Alper was born. And then someone else thought to themselves, man, even with Alpers, you have to hope that the cop and the crook happen to cross paths at just the right time. What if we took some Alpers and mounted them on poles and put them all over the city so that they could constantly scan every car? And so they did. About halfway through my career, my area got Alpers attached to our vehicles and a stationary one on one of the big busy streets that brought people into and out of the city. As such, we received training on both the uses of the platform as well as some of the legal and ethical issues surrounding the data we were collecting. One of the issues is obvious. Having cameras scanning and evaluating thousands of random people all the time is a big deal. It's an expansion of the surveillance state, another tool that makes traveling in public something that exposes you to state coercion and state violence. But I want to talk about the other issue we dealt with regarding Alpers, and that's the issue of aggregate data. See, an Alper doesn't just scan a plate and see if it comes back wanted. It makes a log of that scan with a date and a time and a GPS coordinate, or in the case of a stationary one, a physical location. And many cities have more than one Alper operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Think about what a curious little kitty of a cop could do with access to all that data. If there was a vehicle he was interested in, he could plot its movements throughout the city over time, gain an idea of habits, favorite hangouts, maybe even work hours, depending on how much data was collected. But take it further. Imagine if an Alper were placed near, say, a methadone clinic, or an anarchist bookstore, or a queer nightclub, or a mosque. Or imagine how Alper data could be used after an anti-police protest to log and track cars in the area. During my time in law enforcement, these concerns were brought up to us, and we always had this counter-argument. You do not have an expectation of privacy when you're out in public. Your movements along a public road are public. A police officer could sit on a bench near an intersection and write down every license plate that passes by if he wanted. A police officer can follow you on the street anywhere you go, all day long if he wants. We would say, these cameras aren't doing anything new that a police officer already couldn't do. But that's not really true in some pretty important ways, two of which I want to highlight: scale and intentionality. Sure, a police officer could write down every license plate they see with a location and a time, but a computer can do it thousands more times, all day, every day, non-stop, never getting tired or bored or distracted. And sure, a cop could keep a notebook of his personal license plate logs and refer back to it later, but a computer can keep millions of records that are easily searchable. In fact, a computer can share its records with other computers in other cities and states. As the saying goes, the dose makes the poison. Scale has the ability to make relatively harmless things harmful. One person, say, visiting Uluru in Australia maybe isn't so much to get excited about, but making it a tourist attraction for hundreds of thousands of visitors was a nightmare for the Anangu people for whom the site is sacred. Any one use of one Alper one time probably feels low on the list of privacy erosions in a surveillance state, but letting cops search a database of all Alper logs over a long time can tell the state a lot about who does what, when, and where, all from the comfort of a laptop, and in most states, all without a warrant or even reasonable suspicion. Beyond that, the other issue here is intentionality. When I was a cop, I had to decide to run a license plate. I had to look around, notice a car, think about my training and experience, form an opinion guided by that knowledge, and decide to act. Same with writing someone a ticket. I had to speak to someone, assess the situation, and use my intuition or my biases, and decide whether or not to issue a citation. What Alpers and red light cameras do is introduce a world where encounters with the surveillance state occur automatically, without a human deciding. No one's spidey sense had to go off. Years of training were not deployed to form an opinion. No, a robot just did something 1,000 times to every car that came near it. Similarly, the decision to save a log or a photo of this or that car is also not being made. The computer saves everything. Even though some analysis seems to indicate that around 99% of all license plates scanned by an Alper are not associated with criminal activity, those scans are stored in police databases, sometimes for years, sometimes forever. Imagine finding out one day that there's a file on you at your local police department. You are known to the police, you're on their radar. So you go down and you meet with a watch commander and you say, "Hey, what did I do wrong? Why are you guys keeping tabs on me?" And he says, "Well, as far as I know, you haven't done anything wrong yet." You'd probably want to say something like, "Great, so get rid of my file if I'm not a suspect and if I don't have a criminal record." But not only would a cop not care about that anyway, in the case of these police databases, it's not even his decision to make. There's nowhere for him to log in and purge your data, and there's typically no legal reason for him to do so anyway. Your data belongs to the state, and it's gonna stay there. And you might be saying, "Okay, well, I'm a law-abiding citizen. I'm not some Antifa soy boy going around torching police departments. I'm not a drug dealer, so who cares?" That may be true, but let's not forget, law-abiding is a social construct. The people in charge will decide for you whether you're law-abiding. Are you saying that you would never, ever, ever peacefully protest police violence in your community one day? Are you saying that you would never, ever petition your government for the redress of grievances? Are you saying that you would never, say, participate in a political campaign for the opponent of an incumbent sheriff or your local mayor? That watch commander was telling the truth. As far as I know, you haven't done anything wrong yet. These police databases are keeping millions of data points on you and your friends and family, not for any specific reason, but just in case. And the technology allows them to do this without thinking about it. It's just been done. Nobody decided, it just happened. I think these questions of scale and intentionality are really important angles to consider as we look at how technology is shaping our world. An obvious example is what's happening with AI. So one of my favorite things to do is to feed the looking glass model pictures of churches and temples and then have it generate its own places of worship. They remind me of places that I see in my dreams, and I find that very interesting. However, in a very short time, we've gone from models that only ingest a limited set of curated text or images to models that have been trained without consent on hundreds of thousands of images and millions of texts. These platforms are being trained on data scraped by bots as well as data sold by the apps we use to make funny selfies or post our art pieces. And it's all being collected and stored just because they can, just in case it's valuable. And now there are these platforms that can just riff on your art instantly without your permission, much less any attribution or monetary reward. As a society, we didn't decide to do this democratically. It's just been done by a bunch of tech bros accountable to nobody. Something that is a fun toy at the individual level has been scaled up in ways that will fundamentally reshape society, not just for artists, but for anyone who produces something that can be instantly digitized, stored, trained on, and recreated by a machine. AI art and AI novels are already here. AI films, magazines, music, games, product copy, therapists, and porn is right around the corner. Another example of the terrifying possibilities of scale and thoughtlessness is what's happening with our retail data. We've known for decades now that retail corporations own and sell all kinds of data about our shopping habits, millions of data points about what we buy, how often, how much. And maybe you don't feel particularly exposed just because these corporations know you treat yourself to peach pear LaCroix. But think about how Republican fascists in many states are working overtime to criminalize abortion and target people who've had miscarriages. Do you think these ghouls won't be trying to query grocery store data looking for people who've purchased pregnancy tests? They're already trying to stop pregnant people from crossing state lines to get abortions. Why wouldn't they try to keep tabs on pregnancy test purchases and match that up with other data to harass people? Think about what else could be used against you. Your neighbors all have cloud-based doorbell cameras recording everything happening in your neighborhood, everyone coming and going, who they're with, what they're carrying. You think the serial harassers in the GOP won't abuse that data? And maybe that sounds slightly far-fetched to you, but it's hard to watch Nazis like Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis waging open war on pregnant people, trans people, and even history books and not wonder what they or their cronies might do with easy access to large data sets. Target sells binders now. Greg Abbott would love to find out who's buying one for their kid so he can make an example of them and frighten everyone else into submission. And again, the problem with AI training sets or retail data sets isn't necessarily any one scenario I can invent in my head. It's that they are so big and so unaccountable, they are just sitting there waiting for anyone to think of something to do with them. Any tech bro incapable of passing Ethics 101, any vulture capitalist, any government official, any cop with a grudge. We have no idea what innovations in cruelty are going to be enabled by the scale of data just laying around out there. And to be clear, I'm not anti-technology, I'm not even anti-AI. I think there are very exciting things we can do with data sets and machine learning models, interesting problems we can solve, and opportunities to improve people's lives, even save lives via innovations in, say, medical technology. The problem is that most of the cool stuff we'd want to do with these technologies either doesn't generate a profit or doesn't protect people on the top of the hierarchy. And the tech projects that do generate profits and protect power structures are going to be very, very bad for most of us, and potentially very, very difficult to get rid of once they're loose. So what's my point in all this? For one thing, I think it's just a good reminder that scale and intentionality can radically alter the ethics and moral considerations that come with projects that would otherwise feel neutral. These kinds of things keep happening, whether it's license plate readers or AI art generators. And we have to be thoughtful about how scale can change the equation for things we design, even less sensational stuff like online communities or political organizations or whatever. For another thing, I think we need to be very aware that the people in charge of us, particularly in the United States, are largely either uninterested or ill-equipped to respond to these considerations. Maybe the Squad or Bernie Sanders might be able to give some good attention to the threat of big data or issues like deepfake porn, but most people in government are bought and paid for by the people exploiting this technology, or they're out-of-touch dinosaurs that can't even open a PDF without a staffer present. By all means, support and elect people who show some level of competence in this area, but prepare for the reality that we're on our own. So link up, support your local anarchist hacker collective, educate yourself on how to protect yourself, and be ready to fight what will probably be an insurgent war against technological exploitation. Am I telling you to learn how to disable and sabotage and destroy expensive stuff? We're living at the intersection of two big issues. One, a lot of wealth has been accumulated by some of the grossest shitheads on Earth. And two, capitalism is in a slow state of collapse, working for fewer and fewer people every year. Some might even say the one is part of the reason we have the other. This intersection is extremely dangerous because the shitheads are going to use that accumulated wealth to distract you and misdirect you and control you and disable you to prevent the consequences of a dying world from showing up on their front steps. They're doing it now with the police and the military and corporate monopolies, and they're going to make it even worse with technology and automation, data exploitation, and stuff we can't even imagine yet. So just keep your guard up. Be curious about where your data is, where it's going, who has it, who can access it, and what they can do with it. And when you see exciting new technology, by all means, imagine the fun things you can do with it and all the good that it can bring. But also, ask yourself the question that I was taught to ask before starting any design project. How could a bad actor use this to harm others? Anyway, what do you think? Do you have any examples of how scale can turn something good into something bad? Are you suffering from techno-pessimism? Let's get into it in the comments. As always, please feed the YouTube intelligence some tasty data bits via your like buttons, your subscribe buttons, your notification buttons, whatever other buttons they got crammed down there. And as always, please share this video with somebody that you think might get a kick out of it. Thank you for spending time with me tonight. Hope to see you on the next one. Have a good night.